We find ourselves in the 80s. An anime from that era stood out significantly from the others because it featured a small monkey on the cover. Trying to figure out the name of this little monkey, it turns out it's called Minky Momo. Between the popular Japanese culture and the internet culture of recent years, this little pink-haired monkey seems to have transformed into something like a curse that has caused many misfortunes. But let's take it step by step. The plot of Minky Momo is exactly what one would expect from an 80s show. A simple excuse to sell toys, which actually work quite well. But we'll get there. The plot goes as follows. Momo is a 12-year-old princess living in the kingdom of Fenarinarsa, the land of dreams and fantasy, which is disappearing because the inhabitants of planet Earth have stopped dreaming and hoping. In the English wiki and in the anime itself, they explain that the problem is that they are in danger of drifting away from Earth's orbit and disappearing. In any case, the almost apocalyptic situation for this kingdom prevents its inhabitants from helping humans as they should. So the kings of Fenarinarsa decide to send their daughter to Earth to help humans, granting their wishes, assisting them in their work, or similar things. Basically, Momo must perform good deeds to obtain magic or something similar, and thus help her kingdom. One notable ability is her capacity to become an adult to take on various jobs to help the humans she encounters. She essentially kidnaps a childless human couple and makes them believe she is their daughter. And this is where the first unsettling signs arise. What is a kidnapping in exchange for the salvation of humanity? What I've seen of the anime is genuinely amusing, I believe. I'm not much into magical girl genres. I think with the classic Japanese formula, everything works. Momo listens to someone with problems, uses her magic, transforms, and makes everyone happy. The idea works quite well. Perhaps part of this success has to do with Takeshi Shudo's involvement in writing the show's scripts. If you don't know who he is, he's the screenwriter for Pokémon, so you can already imagine what it means to have a genius in the field and toy selling. Minky Momo was a real success in its time, being a show tuned in by both children and adults for very specific things that happened in the episodes. We can analyze the reasons for this, as we can truly say it was something very well structured, despite its simple premise. The initial intention for which it was created to sell toys was almost imperceptible, and we have to say that this also worked very well. However, for this magical girl, things would end tragically. If you look for information on this story, they all seem to agree that the main problem was that, at least from the toy sales perspective, they weren't getting enough or expected profits. Something that, even though we could effectively reduce it to this, seems to be a bit more complicated. Minky Momo had practically all kinds of toys and derivative products which, even today, are still in production. But it seems that the profits were not distributed so fairly. The company responsible for the toys did not consider the product profitable, but it appears that others involved did. Indeed, this conflict led to this anime seeing its apparent end in a very premature and cruel way. Takeshi Shudo had to be a bit ingenious in the way they could give him a proper closure, and it was at that moment that he had the idea that many writers have but don't dare to execute, killing the main character. On January 27, 1983, what would have been the temporarily last episode of Minky Momo was scheduled to air on TV Tokyo. In this episode, which would be number 46, recalling this fact, what seemed to be a great day for Minky, if it were a creepypasta from the year 2010, would begin to twist terribly. Just as she changes her clothes, her magical necklace breaks into pieces. This moment is interesting because a scene occurs in complete silence. She doesn't give it much importance and decides to happily continue her day. At school, she has a nightmare in which her wand disappears, which is also the source of her power. It is not directly stated, but these absences end up making a girl, mortal like all others, common and ordinary, precisely less than 10 minutes into the episode. The worst thing happens. Minky is in a park where some boys are playing baseball. Suddenly their ball flies out, and they ask her to pass it to them, to which she agrees. The ball was just halfway. It sounds like a horn, but it's a child in a toy car. He bids her a happy farewell, and it is at that moment when he enters the scene that a truck speeding tries to avoid the child in the toy car. But when it skids, it ends up hitting Minky in a scene completely devoid of audio, except for a faintly sounding siren. Everything is clear. Minky is dead. In the next scene, we see her father in a cemetery accompanied by his pets. Now, the chapter does not end here as such. In a subsequent scene, we see Minky's real parents lamenting their loss. And then quite strange things happen. Time passes and apparently Minky reincarnates into a child without powers, who is delivered to her earthly parents. And from there, suddenly the whole chapter takes on a much more fantastical tone. The inhabitants live with humans on Earth. We see Minky again, now a teenager, and everything is very festive, as if she had achieved her purpose. But we see the child again, in whom it is supposed she has reincarnated, as if everything had been a dream. Simply put, the chapter could be summarized in one half tragic and another quite surreal. All of this would have happened as a simple, strange conclusion to an anime, not because apparently, at the time of the broadcast, 4 earthquakes were recorded in the Japanese nation, specifically in Osaka, Kobe, and the northwest of the country. The coincidence was really strange. When things calmed down, many thought that the impact on this conclusion had been such as to cause the earthquakes. Obviously, the coincidence is terrible, but everything is normal in a certain sense. The problem is that the matter does not end here. It must be said that Shudo was quite ingenious with this conclusion. Minky was killed by a fast toy truck, but the problem is that things did not end here. Despite the desire to conclude production, the series had to continue for contractual reasons. So, the following week, another episode would be broadcast, where everything would go on in total normality, as if we had not seen the death of the protagonist. And everything continued like this until May 26, 1983, with the final chapter, number 63. And how ironic things are, the chapter was ending precisely at 11:59 on that day, when one of the most unfortunate natural disasters to ever strike that country began. The so-called Japan Sea earthquake. With a magnitude of 7.8 at the time, the earthquake caused a terrible tsunami that hit the coast about 12 minutes after the earthquake, even before the alarms rang, with a wave almost 15 meters high. The coincidence of both events contradicted all subsequent predictions and analyses, resulting in a diametrically opposite catastrophic inconsistency. Of course, we are talking about a colossal disaster, but once things calmed down, the coincidence that another disaster occurred in, let's say, the new conclusion of Minky Momo did not go unnoticed, and many Japanese, faithful to their superstitions, soon adopted the idea that somehow anime, or at least their endings, were cursed. Something that, of course, continues to sound absurd, but this, as you can imagine, does not end here. Despite the unfortunate coincidences and business decisions derived from the apparent failure that the series represented, Minky Momo continued to remain relevant in the following years, finding a way to spread the word. In 1991, a second series of Minky Momo was released, which was somehow different from the first, standing out because now Minky's realm was in an underwater world, and because at some point this Minky met the Minky from the first series, a strange but beautiful moment in a way. After 62 episodes, the series ended on April 23, 1992, and fortunately this time nothing happened. Takeshi Shudo continued to develop some things for Minky Momo, such as a few episodes of a manga, and by the end of the 2000s, the entire project was cancelled. It would be fair to say that the curse only affected the first series. The second didn't seem to have any effect, and most likely, neither did the third. But it's better to remain in doubt. However, there is a Japanese program where they discuss the issue and handle the idea that the word Momo itself is already something negative, and perhaps this influenced the apparent effect of the work. In any case, the influence of Minky Momo in anime, and especially in the world of magical girls, is quite tangible. Despite being a series that does not follow very strict rules, like more contemporary ones, many authors have undoubtedly drawn inspiration from its concepts.